Imagine an empire so resilient, so extraordinary, that it outlived its own death by 1,000 years. In 476 AD, the Roman Empire fell. The Eternal City was sacked. The legions crumbled. Historians marked the end of an era, but they were wrong. Because while the Western Roman Empire collapsed into darkness and chaos, in the East, Rome lived on. Not as a memory, not as a myth, as a living, breathing empire that would endure for another 1,000 years. They called themselves Romans. Their capital was Constantinople. The city we know today as Istanbul. Their empire stretched from the Middle East to the Balkans, from North Africa to the Black Sea. We call them the Byzantines, and this is their entire history. To understand Byzantium, we must go back to 330 AD, to one of the most consequential decisions in human history. The Roman Emperor Constantine the Great stood at the edge of the Bosphorus Strait. The narrow channel dividing Europe from Asia, and made a choice. He would move the capital of the Roman Empire here, to this perfect crossroads of the world. He called it Nova Roma, New Rome, but the people would call it Constantinople, the city of Constantine. Within decades, Constantinople became one of the most fortified and magnificent cities on Earth. Triple walls stretched across the peninsula. A massive harbor chain could be raised to block enemy ships. The city was essentially impregnable. And then in 380 AD, Emperor Theodosius made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, cementing the identity that would define Byzantium for centuries. This was not merely a political empire, it was a Christian empire, God's empire on earth. In 395 AD, Emperor Theodosius died and split the empire between his two sons. The west went to Honorius, the east to Arcadius. It was meant to be administrative, temporary. It was neither. The Western Roman Empire lasted barely 80 more years. Barbarian invasions, economic collapse, military failure. By 476 AD, it was gone. The last Western emperor, a teenager named Romulus Augustulus, was simply sent into retirement by a Germanic warlord who didn't even bother to take the imperial title. The East? The East endured. And in Constantinople, the emperors continued to call themselves the rightful rulers of all Rome, because in their minds they were. Of all the Byzantine emperors, and there were dozens, none cast a longer shadow than Justinian I. He ruled from 527 to 565 AD, and in those 38 years, he came breathtakingly close to restoring the entire Roman Empire. Justinian was born a peasant in a small Macedonian village. His uncle Justin rose through the military ranks to become emperor, and when Justin died without an heir, Justinian inherited the purple. But behind every great emperor, the old saying goes, and in Justinian's case, it was devastatingly true. Behind him stood Theodora. Theodora had been an actress in the Byzantine world, roughly equivalent to a courtesan. She was everything the aristocracy despised. She was also the most formidable political mind of her era. Together, Justinian and Theodora would reshape the world. In 532 AD, Constantinople nearly destroyed itself from within. The Nika riots, named for the Greek word for conquer, began as a chariot racing dispute and escalated into the most violent urban uprising the Byzantine Empire would ever face. For 5 days, the city burned. Tens of thousands died. Factions from the Hippodrome united against the emperor. Justinian's advisors told him to flee by ship. And he almost did. It was Theodora who stopped him. Standing before the imperial court as the city collapsed around them, she spoke words that echo through history. Those who have worn the crown should never survive its loss. I hold to the old saying that purple makes a fine burial shroud. Justinian stayed. His generals flooded the Hippodrome with soldiers. 30,000 rioters were slaughtered. The revolt was over, and from the ashes, Justinian built something eternal. On the site of the burned churches, Justinian commissioned the greatest building the ancient world had ever attempted. The Hagia Sophia, Holy Wisdom. It was completed in just 5 years, an architectural miracle that still stands today. When Justinian walked through its doors for the first time, he reportedly whispered, "Solomon, I have surpassed thee." The dome appeared to float, suspended from heaven by golden chains, visitors wrote. 40 windows at its base flooded the interior with light that seemed supernatural. For nearly 1,000 years, it would be the largest cathedral in the world. While building wonders at home, Justinian's brilliant general Belisarius was reconquering the lost Western territories. North Africa fell in 533. Italy, including Rome itself, was retaken by 540. Southern Spain followed. For one brief, extraordinary moment, the Mediterranean was once again a Roman lake. Then came the plague. The plague of Justinian arrived in 541 AD on grain ships from Egypt. Modern scientists believe it was bubonic plague, the same family that would devastate Europe 8 centuries later as the Black Death. At its peak in Constantinople, 5,000 people were dying every single day. The emperor himself caught it and nearly died. Perhaps a quarter of the entire population of the empire perished. The reconquests could not be held. The treasury was empty. Justinian died in 565 AD, having touched the very edge of Roman restoration and watched it slip away. In the 630s, a new force erupted from the Arabian desert that would permanently reshape the Byzantine world. Within a decade of the Prophet Muhammad's death, Arab armies, united by the new faith of Islam, had conquered Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. These were not peripheral territories. Egypt alone supplied half of Constantinople's grain. Palestine was the Holy Land, spiritually central to the Christian Empire. Their loss was catastrophic. The empire that Justinian had stretched across the Mediterranean was now compressed, smaller. But not dead, the Arabs tried twice to take Constantinople directly, the ultimate prize. In 674 and again in 717. Both times the city's legendary walls held. But there was another weapon, a Byzantine secret weapon that may have saved not just their empire, but all of European civilization. Greek fire. Greek fire was a liquid incendiary weapon that burned on water and could not be extinguished by water. Its exact formula remains unknown to this day. It was projected through bronze tubes mounted on ships, creating walls of flame that consumed Arab fleets. Constantinople held. The Arab expansion into Europe was blocked. Some historians argue that without Byzantine resistance here, all of Europe might have faced a very different future. The 9th and 10th centuries brought what historians call the Macedonian Renaissance. A golden age of art, scholarship, and military expansion. Emperor Basil I founded a dynasty that would produce remarkable rulers. His great-grandson, Basil II, known as the Bulgar Slayer, was one of the most formidable military commanders in Byzantine history. After defeating the Bulgarian Empire in 1014, Basil captured 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers. He blinded 99 of every 100, leaving one eye to every 100th man so they could lead the others home. When the Bulgarian Tsar saw his army return, he died of shock. The Byzantines had survived, and for a brief century, they flourished. In 1071, the Byzantine Empire suffered the single greatest military defeat in its history. At the Battle of Manzikert, Emperor Romanos IV led his army against the Seljuk Turks. And was captured. It was the first time in centuries that a Byzantine emperor had been taken prisoner in battle. The psychological shock was enormous. The practical consequences were worse. In the chaos that followed, civil war, rival emperors, political collapse, Anatolia was lost. Modern Turkey, the agricultural heartland of the empire, the source of most of its soldiers and tax revenue, the empire would never fully recover. Of all the disasters that befell the Byzantine Empire, none was more shocking, more improbable, than what happened in 1204. The Fourth Crusade had been intended for Egypt. But through a series of political manipulations involving debts, diversions, and the ambitions of the Doge of Venice, the Crusader army ended up outside Constantinople. On April 13th, 1204, they broke through the walls. For 3 days, the greatest Christian city in the world was sacked by fellow Christians. The Hagia Sophia was looted. Libraries were burned. Centuries of art, scholarship, and accumulated wealth were carried away or destroyed. Ancient bronze statues, priceless works from classical antiquity, were melted down for coins. Pope Innocent III, when he heard what had happened, was horrified. He called it a scandal, but the damage was done. A Crusader Latin empire was established in Constantinople. The Byzantines were exiles in their own civilization. It would take 57 years before they retook their capital. The Ottoman Turks emerged in the early 14th century as one small Turkish principality among many. Within a generation, they had conquered most of Anatolia. Within 2 generations, they had crossed into Europe. By the early 15th century, the Byzantine Empire consisted of little more than Constantinople itself, a few Aegean islands, and a small territory in southern Greece. They were an empire in name only. Surrounded on all sides by Ottoman territory. Constantine the 11th, Palaiologos, became emperor in 1449. He inherited a dying empire with an empty treasury. A city that had shrunk to perhaps 50,000 inhabitants, within walls built for 500,000. Ottoman Sultan of extraordinary ability, determined to finish what his predecessors had begun. That Sultan was Mehmed II. He was 21 years old. Constantine made desperate appeals to the West for help. The help that arrived amounted to a few thousand Genoese mercenaries. It was not enough. On April 6, 1453, Mehmed's army surrounded Constantinople. His secret weapon was a Hungarian engineer named Urban, who had first offered his services to Constantine, who couldn't afford him. Mehmed could. Urban built him a cannon so large it took 60 oxen to move it. Capable of hurling stone balls weighing half a ton. The walls that had withstood every army for 1,000 years began to crumble. For 53 days, Constantinople held. The defenders, barely 7,000 men against tens of thousands, fought with extraordinary courage. Constantine himself fought on the walls alongside his men. On May 28th, Constantine gathered his remaining commanders for a final ceremony in the Hagia Sophia. He asked forgiveness from those he had wronged. He said goodbye. In the early hours of May 29, 1453, the Ottomans found a small gate. The Kirka Porta, left accidentally unlocked. Soldiers poured through. The walls were breached. Constantine the 11th tore off his imperial insignia so he would not be captured alive. He charged into the fighting. He was never seen again. His body was identified only by his purple boots, embroidered with golden eagles. The mark of a Roman emperor. The Eastern Roman Empire, which had endured for 1,123 years, was finished. But what Byzantium built could not be destroyed by any army. Byzantine scholars fleeing to Italy carried with them the works of ancient Greece, Plato, Aristotle, Sophocles, texts that had been preserved in Constantinople while Western Europe forgot them. These manuscripts helped ignite the Italian Renaissance. Byzantine missionaries, Cyril and Methodius, had created the Cyrillic alphabet. Still used today across Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. The Russian Orthodox Church traces its lineage directly to Constantinople. Russia's czars called Moscow the Third Rome. Byzantine law, based on Justinian's code, became the foundation of legal systems across Europe. And the Hagia Sophia still stands. After serving as a church for nearly 1,000 years, then a mosque, then a museum, today it is a mosque again. But its walls still carry the mosaics of Byzantine emperors and empresses. The golden tesserae still catch the light the same way they did when Justinian first walked through the doors. The Byzantine Empire is gone, but it never truly disappeared. It lives in the architecture around the Mediterranean, in the liturgy of Orthodox churches, in the legal codes of modern nations, and in the very idea that civilization can endure. That even the longest night eventually ends. They called themselves Romans. For 11 centuries, they were right. This has been the entire history of the Byzantine Empire. If you want to go deeper, the emperors, the battles, the art, let us know in the comments.
And if you're new here, welcome to Empire Veal.